42 seconds. That's all the Arizona Cardinals needed. 42 ticks of the clock stood between them and one of the most improbable championship runs in NFL history. They had the lead. They had the momentum. They had Larry Fitzgerald, who had just done something so extraordinary that the entire football world was ready to declare him the Super Bowl MVP. And then Ben Roethlisberger dropped back from his own 1-2 yard line. What followed over those next 42 seconds is one of the most dramatic finishes in Super Bowl history. A game that gave us the longest play in Super Bowl history. Two of the greatest wide receiver performances you'll ever see. And a finish so cruel and so perfect that Arizona Cardinals fans still feel it in their chest 15 years later. This is the story of Super Bowl XLIII. The year the Cardinals almost won the damn Super Bowl. How did the Cardinals even get here? Before we get into the game itself, we need to talk about how absolutely nobody expected the Arizona Cardinals to be playing in Super Bowl XLIII in the first place. The Cardinals were a franchise with one of the longest championship droughts in American professional sports. They hadn't won an NFL title since 1947, yes, 1947, when they were still based in Chicago. The team had spent decades bouncing between cities, from Chicago to Street, Louis, and eventually to the desert of Arizona, accumulating losses, mediocrity, and a reputation as one of the NFL's most irrelevant franchises. Then Ken Whisenhunt arrived as head coach in 2007, and things started to shift. The key piece was Kurt Warner, a quarterback whose career had already produced one of the great stories in sports history. Warner had gone from stocking grocery shelves to winning Super Bowl MVP honors with the Street Louis Rams in the early 2000s, and had spent the years since dealing with injuries, roster battles, and the creeping sense that his best days were behind him. In Arizona, Warner found a second wind, and in 2008, with Larry Fitzgerald and Anquan Boldin as his weapons, he played some of the best football of his life. The Cardinals won the NFC West with a 9-7 record, not exactly a dominant team by any measure. They were underdogs in every single playoff game. They beat the Atlanta Falcons in the wild card round, knocked off the Carolina Panthers in a back-and-forth divisional game, and then beat the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC Championship. 3 road wins, or close to it, by a team that almost nobody believed in. And somehow, they were in Tampa, playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. For the Super Bowl, nobody gave them a chance. Kurt Warner had other ideas, the first half Harrison's moment. Super Bowl XLIII started in a way that suggested this might actually be Arizona's night. Warner was sharp. Fitzgerald was getting loose from the Steelers' coverage. The Cardinals were moving the ball with purpose against one of the best defenses in football. Pittsburgh's vaunted defensive unit, built around Troy Polamalu, James Harrison, and a front seven that had dominated the AFC all season, was being tested. With 18 seconds left in the first half, the Cardinals had moved the ball down to the Pittsburgh 1-yard line. They were trailing 10-7, but were about to take the lead. 1 yard. One play, a chance to go into halftime ahead against the mighty Steelers. Warner took the snap and fired toward Anquan Boldin just across the goal line. The pass was a fraction too inside. Linebacker James Harrison, who had dropped back into coverage, all 242 pounds of him, got his hands on it at the goal line, and then he ran. Harrison caught the ball at the end zone, turned upfield, and began what became the longest play in Super Bowl history, a 100-yard interception return along the right sideline for a touchdown. Cardinals players had multiple chances to knock him down or push him out of bounds. Each time, Harrison somehow stayed in bounds, stayed on his feet, and kept running. By the time he crossed the goal line, he was physically exhausted. He needed help getting off the field, but the damage was done. Instead of trailing 10-7, the Cardinals now trailed 17-7. Just like that, one play had potentially swung the momentum of the entire Super Bowl. We weren't going to throw in the towel, Arizona defensive end Bertrand Berry said afterward. But, privately, you wonder if the air came out of that locker room at halftime. Going into halftime down 3 with the ball to start the second half is a very different proposition than going into halftime down 10, having just watched the other team score a pick-6 to close the half. The extended Super Bowl halftime with Bruce Springsteen performing gave the Cardinals time to breathe and regroup. They were going to need it. The third quarter collapse. The second half started with promise for Arizona. They got the ball first and had an opportunity to immediately cut into the deficit. Instead, the penalty bug bit them hard. On the Steelers' first drive of the second half, Arizona's defense committed 3 major penalties that gifted Pittsburgh 34 free yards. The Steelers didn't even have to earn it. Arizona handed it to them. That drive ended in a field goal, pushing the lead to 20-7, and suddenly this felt like a game that was slipping away. The Cardinals finished the game with 11 penalties for 106 yards in a Super Bowl against the Pittsburgh Steelers. That is simply too many unforced errors against too good a team on too big a stage. It is unfortunate we didn't play our best game, or our cleanest game, Warner would say afterward, with the diplomatic understatement of a man who had just spent 3 hours watching his team give away first downs and field position. Heading into the fourth quarter, Arizona trailed 20-7 against a Pittsburgh defense that had been one of the best in football all season, with a quarterback who had just thrown the most damaging interception of the entire postseason, and then Larry Fitzgerald took over, Fitzgerald's masterpiece. Before we talk about what happened in the fourth quarter, let's establish something. Larry Fitzgerald was already one of the best wide receivers in the NFL in 2009. He was young, he was physical, he was a nightmare in the red zone, and he had elite route running ability that made him effective from any alignment. But the Pittsburgh Steelers defense had spent the first 3 quarters making him disappear. Their cornerbacks, Ike Taylor in particular, had held Fitzgerald to essentially nothing in the first half. The Steelers' plan was clear. Take away the best player on the field, make Warner find other options, and suffocate the Cardinals' offense. It worked for 3 quarters, and then, in the fourth quarter, something changed. Whether it was a schematic adjustment from Arizona, fatigue in the Steelers' coverage, or simply Larry Fitzgerald deciding he wasn't going home without a fight, the floodgates opened. First came the jump ball touchdown catch. With Pittsburgh still leading 20-7, Fitzgerald went up in a crowd, outmuscled his defender, and brought down a touchdown that made it 20-13. Then came the safety. Pittsburgh was called for holding in the end zone, giving Arizona 2 free points and making it 20-16. Suddenly, a 1-3-point fourth quarter deficit was down to 4. And then came the play. With less than 3 minutes left in the game, Warner took the snap and hit Fitzgerald in stride over the middle. Fitzgerald caught it at about the 30-yard line and turned on the Jets. The Steelers' secondary had no angle. Fitzgerald ran past one defender, then another, and didn't stop until he reached the end zone, a 6-4-yard catch and run that put Arizona ahead 23-20. Raymond James Stadium went into shock. The Cardinals were leading the Pittsburgh Steelers in the Super Bowl with under 3 minutes to play. Warner, who finished with 377 yards and 3 touchdowns, becoming the first quarterback in history with 3 300-yard games in a single postseason, had done it. Fitzgerald had done it. A 9-7 wildcard team from Arizona had somehow taken the lead in the Super Bowl. We went up, and it was on our shoulders, linebacker Carlos Dansby said. The defense had 2:44 to finish the job. They couldn't do it. The drive, 2:44 to history. What happened next is one of the most impressive clutch drives in Super Bowl history, and credit has to go where it's due. Ben Roethlisberger was magnificent. Pittsburgh got the ball back at their own 1-2-yard line. Not the 20, not the 35-12. A holding penalty had pushed them back even further after a play. They needed to go 88 yards to win the Super Bowl with no timeouts in under 3 minutes. Most teams don't come back from that. Most quarterbacks crumble under that weight. Roethlisberger was not most quarterbacks. He started hitting completions in rhythm, moving the chains, managing the clock. The Cardinals' defense, which had played admirably all season and had been on the field for a long, grinding game, needed one stop. Just one stop. And the Lombardi Trophy was heading to Arizona. They couldn't get it. First down, then another, then another. Roethlisberger scrambling away from pressure, finding receivers, keeping the chains moving. The Cardinals' pass rush got close. Hands were in Roethlisberger's face on multiple plays. But close wasn't good enough. With the ball at the Arizona 6-yard line and a few seconds on the clock, Roethlisberger dropped back one final time. He had Santonio Holmes running in the back right corner of the end zone. 3 Cardinals defenders were there, including safety Adrian Wilson, who had a shot at breaking it up. Holmes went up. Holmes came down. Both feet landed just inside the back line of the end zone, his toes dragging the turf in a catch so perfectly executed that it looked like something out of a highlight reel, because it was. The kind of catch that wins MVPs and gets replayed for decades. Steelers 27, Cardinals 23. 42 seconds left, the final 42 seconds. The Cardinals got the ball back with 35 seconds after the kickoff. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was Kurt Warner. It was Larry Fitzgerald, who had just put up one of the greatest individual performances in Super Bowl history. It was still possible. Warner took the field, surveyed the situation, and started moving the Cardinals down the field. He had been the best player in the game all night. He had already defied every expectation. One more drive. One more miracle. It was all Arizona needed. And then a Pittsburgh pass rusher hit Warner as he was throwing. The ball came loose. Fumble. Pittsburgh recovered. It was over. Larry Fitzgerald stood at the end zone where he had just scored and watched the clock run out. He finished with 7 catches for 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. Santonio Holmes was named MVP, but the argument could be made for Warner 31 of 43 for 377 yards and 3 touchdowns, or even Fitzgerald himself, who had been the most dynamic player on the field in the second half. In any other ending, either of them walks away with the trophy. It hurts so bad to see that clock run down, Fitzgerald said afterward. To have it snatched away, it hurts. Guard Reggie Wells put it more simply. It feels like we should still be out there playing what could have been. Let's sit with the alternate timeline for a moment, because it's worth doing. If Harrison doesn't intercept that ball at the goal line, or if any one of those Cardinals players manages to knock him out of bounds during his 1-0-0 yard return, Arizona goes into halftime leading, or at worst down 3 with the ball. The entire momentum of the game shifts. The penalty-filled third quarter might not matter as much. The 20-7 hole they had to climb out of never exists. If the defense makes one stop on that final drive, just one Warner gets the ball back. Fitzgerald gets one more chance and Arizona wins. If Warner holds the ball a fraction of a second longer on that final Hail Mary attempt instead of taking the hit, maybe he gets the throw off cleanly. Any one of those things, and the Arizona Cardinals are Super Bowl champions. A franchise with one of the longest title droughts in North American professional sports finally gets its ring. Kurt Warner gets a second Super Bowl win to cement his legacy. Larry Fitzgerald gets the MVP and the trophy he absolutely deserved. Instead, the Cardinals went home. Offensive coordinator Todd Haley left to take the Kansas City Chiefs head coaching job. Contract issues scattered the roster, and Arizona has never been back to a Super Bowl since. For Warner, it was his last realistic shot at another ring. He retired after the 2009 season, and while he eventually made the Pro Football Hall of Fame, that fumble on the final play of Super Bowl XLIII will always be the footnote that follows him. For Fitzgerald, it was the peak of a Hall of Fame career that somehow never produced a championship. He spent the rest of his career in Arizona loyal to a franchise that loved him back and retired without a ring. He deserved better. 42 seconds, 100 yards, 1 toe tap catch in the corner of the end zone. Super Bowl XLIII is one of the greatest games in the history of the championship game and one of the most heartbreaking. It gave us James Harrison's miraculous 1-0-0 yard return, Larry Fitzgerald's unforgettable second-half explosion, Ben Roethlisberger's ice-cold winning drive, and Santonio Holmes making one of the most technically perfect catches under pressure anyone has ever seen. The Cardinals left everything on the field. Every single player in that locker room gave everything they had. It just wasn't enough by 42 seconds and 1 fumble. We came here to win and be world champs, Anquan Boldin said afterward. But I am proud of the guys in that locker room. They should be proud. What that team accomplished, taking a 9-7 wildcard squad all the way to the final play of the Super Bowl, is one of the great underdog stories in NFL history. They just didn't get to finish it the way they deserved. Do you think the Cardinals should have won Super Bowl XLIII? Would a different call at the goal line in the first half have changed everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe for more NFL storytelling like this. And I'll see you next time.